Peter Hain.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I add my delight to seeing you in the chair and just respond briefly to the honourable member for Windsor by saying, does he have so little confidence that his party is going to win the next general election? Isn't that the reason for rushing to an early referendum? Madam Deputy Speaker, I wish to speak to Amendment 77, which I've moved, and 78, which are in my name as well. 77 wants to make sure that if there is to be a referendum in that year, as the government is proposing, that it does not fall during the UK presidency of the European Union. It would be absurd to have a referendum running coterminously with our presidency of the European Union. And the second one says that there should be at least a 28-week, roughly a 7-month delay between setting a date by order for a referendum and a referendum itself, to allow for full consultation. And this is the burden of my contribution today, Madam Deputy Speaker. And to echo the amendment moved by my honourable friend, the member for Glasgow North East, and the new Schedule 2, which he is down in his name and my name jointly, which also calls for much greater consultation, because I'm very concerned indeed that Britain may be sleepwalking into withdrawal from the European Union without realising that this would be the result of circumstances created first by the Prime Minister's referendum timetable and second by this bill. An exit would be catastrophic for British jobs and prosperity, which is why any referendum, and particularly any date for a referendum, which is specified in various ways in these amendments, should only be considered after the fullest possible formal consultation with the British people. Yeah, of course.
Through you, Madam Speaker, would the right honourable gentleman explain his remark that it would lose loads and loads of jobs in this country when we have a balance of payments deficit with the EU of some 70 billion?
Actually, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm grateful that the honourable members raised that issue, because I'm going to deal with it later on and call for greater consultation on this matter, because unless these facts are revealed objectively and all the organisations are properly consulted, it seems to me people are not going to be in a position to make a sensible decision about whether to vote yes or no in the referendum that he seeks. And the great flaw in this bill is that it proposes no such consultation. There's no obligation on the government at all to consult anybody. No sense that, other than a campaign, which will be compressed into a particular period with the media focus at that time inevitable, no sense that everybody will be involved in a great debate, which is an historic issue for Britain's future and indeed Europe's future. Madam Deputy Speaker, it sets an arbitrary time limit without specifying any or placing any obligation upon the government to consult. The referendum itself will be the only consultation, in quotes, by bouncing voters into a decision, either by the end of 2017 or, if the honourable member for Windsor gets his way, by October 2015. For example, the business community needs to be properly consulted, and we specify a new Schedule 2 subclause J, Madam Deputy Speaker, the ways in which the business community could be consulted. For example, the CBI, which is specifically mentioned in a new Schedule 2. It only recently reported that 8 out of 10 CBI members, including roughly the same proportion of their small and medium-sized enterprise members, said they would vote for the UK to remain a member of the European Union in a referendum if it were held tomorrow. They should be properly consulted. They shouldn't simply be presented with a referendum on an arbitrary date. Nearly three-quarters of CBI member businesses reported that the UK's membership of the EU has had a positive overall impact on their business. They should all be consulted as well, so that everybody can properly take a view, whether they're employees or whether they're in management, and transmit their view to the wider community.
Labour members who are speaking appear to be consulting the CBI, Uncle Tom Cobley and all. That's all fair enough, but are they in favour of consulting the British people in a referendum? Yes or no?
Madam Deputy Speaker, Labour's never been afraid of consulting people in referenda. We've called more referenda in this country than any other government in our history. We're the only party that ever called a referendum on the European Union after the Conservatives took us into a membership of the common market without a referendum. So we've never been afraid of consulting the people, and we've specified the circumstances in which we would hold a referendum in the future should those circumstances arise, Madam Deputy Speaker. Despite their frustrations with many of the issues concerning European Union membership, which I share as a pro-European, over half of CBI member companies, 52%, say that they have directly benefited from the introduction of common European standards, with only 15% suggesting this had a negative impact. Only 15%. Again, a consultation would reveal that and enable it to be properly debated and assessed and considered. Indeed, those CBI members believe that UK influence has helped maximise the openness of the European Union. 72% of British businesses believe that the UK currently has a significant influence on EU policies that affect their businesses. So that's, yes, of course.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. But I would have thought that these points of view would come out in the campaign. Why would we need to actually have consultation on this? Surely in the campaign, yes or no or whatever, the various interest groups would be lobbying hard directly to the British people rather than us.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I've taken every intervention that I've been requested to make so far, but I do want to make some progress. But to answer his point, he knows as an experienced politician, as we all know, in the din and the pressure of a 3-week campaign with all the focus that then brings, it's very, very difficult to get all these arguments across. And all these issues and a proper assessment so the British public has a chance to make its mind up, free from the influence of Eurosceptic newspapers who dominate the debate, actually making their minds up on the facts by consulting the CBI, the TUC, the IOD, all the different organisations that will want to have their say. That is the way to do it, by having a proper consultation, which this bill does not provide for. And I mentioned one significant organisation and body that will need to be consulted, and that could be considered under new Schedule 2 subsection J, Madam Deputy Speaker, and that's the City. Because the City, I think, such a consultation would reveal, according to the evidence that we have, takes the same view that British membership is positive for financial institutions. So why is it not being consulted? Is the government scared of consulting it? Is the mover of this bill scared of consulting the City, when 84% of Britain's financial sector executives are strongly in favour of keeping right at the centre of the European Union, according to a survey published in October last month by City UK. We would be able to drill down into that and see whether actually that is a proper assessment or not. The financial services sector, of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, accounts for 13% of GDP and contributes over 60 billion of taxes. Nearly 80% of all foreign exchange trades in the EU take place in the City, and 74% of all interest rate derivative trades take place in the City. All of those trades in the whole of the European Union. The idea that the City would want to be frog-marched out of Europe is a complete nonsense, and a consultation would reveal that. Of course, yes.
Massive pro-European credentials, as he put it. Can he explain why he voted against the Maastricht Treaty on the third reading?
To the right honourable member, because actually I'm going to name check him in my next paragraph, because I was going to refer to precisely that. On the point of the City being properly consulted under new Schedule 2 and under Amendment 68, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think its concerns, like those of CBI members, need to be understood by the electorate well in advance of a short and compressed campaign, to avoid voters being bamboozled by newspapers and being stampeded into a referendum.
I think the honourable member is making some important points, and I suspect we probably agree on whether or not Britain should be in or out of the European Union. But he must accept we don't really need a formal consultation exercise to find out what the CBI think, because they said so very clearly on Monday in a very definitive report on this. They said that while the UK could certainly survive outside the EU, None of the alternatives suggested offers a clear path to an improved balance of advantages and disadvantages or greater influence. The CBI clearly want us to stay in. Do we really need a consultation to establish that?
Do is have the government to properly consult the CBI, not just stick a copy of their report in the library, but have a report to Parliament, as my honourable friend's amendment that I'm supporting actually provides for. I mean, it's a serious report by a serious organisation.
My honourable friend, right honourable friend, just
I will, and well,
he's been
yes,
very
I will.
generous to the other side and is now being generous to me. But who would we consult with? Because I think this is the missing link. About peace. You know, we're running up to Remembrance Sunday. And bad newspapers leaders and bad politicians, you know, the running up to 1914 led this country into war. Europe, the European Union, has kept prosperity and peace for all these years. Are we going to give that up?
Well, it's a point that I will be coming to, Madam Deputy Speaker, in terms of consulting groups like the Royal Legion and the Royal British Legion and so on, yes.
My honourable friend for giving way. I think one consultee that my honourable friend mentions is the National Farmers Union, and those of us who represent rural areas are always fearful, because urban areas are by their very nature in the majority, that the voice of rural Britain will be left out. Would my honourable friend agree with me that this is of pivotal importance that farming groups are considered?
I will, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm about to make that point or in a few minutes' time. And I now come to the point that was raised by the Right Honourable Member for Stone. I am a pro-European, but I'm a critical one. Yeah. That's why my amendment 77 and 78 and my honourable friend's amendment 68 and new Schedule 2, which my I'm supporting, requires full consultation. I'm not a Europhile. I don't see the EU, who doesn't see that the EU needs reform and who wants integration at all costs. I'm a practical European. I voted yes in the 1975 referendum, but as an MP in 1992, I voted no in the House to the Maastricht Treaty, but amongst others, the honourable member for Stone, because I didn't think the foundations upon which the euro was erected were the right ones, and I think time has probably proved us correct. But equally, I'm actually going to make some progress, because otherwise I'll be accused of stringing the debate out, which I don't want to do. As Europe Minister over a decade ago, I was intensely frustrated with what I called the Brussels bubble, mainly inhabited by Commission officials, small country ministers and European parliamentarians existing in a world of its own, forming an elite and making the EU increasingly unpopular amongst its citizens. And this is the point about a proper consultation, none of this means that we should pull out. Yeah. Any more than Scottish frustrations with the Westminster bubble mean that Scotland should withdraw from the United Kingdom, or voters' frustrations with all the major political parties, including the Labour and Conservative parties, mean that they should give up on parliamentary democracy. The reason why we need consultation as well, systematic consultation, with a report that Parliament can properly assess before deciding how to progress, is also about the point raised earlier, Madam Deputy Speaker. Just imagine, and I'm sure that the Royal British Legion, if consulted, would have something to say about this. Just imagine if at the end of the Second World War, Monet and others had concluded that 80 years of bitter Franco-German hatred made European unity impossible. The following 60 years of Franco-German reconciliation and EU achievement would never have occurred. Yeah. Now, that's a matter that I believe organisations, particularly veterans organisations, under new Schedule 2, subsection J, should be properly consulted upon. It's incumbent upon our generation to find the means to take Europe forward on the global stage, not to retreat into reactionary isolationism. And again, Amendment 68, new Schedule 2, replaces an obligation upon the government to consult over all these matters, and it's absolutely essential that we do so. The consultation would also be an opportunity to recognise that Europe's first achievement was to remove the internal tariff barriers that held back growth and prosperity across the whole of the continent, and including Britain. We accepted that, especially with globalisation, our interests were best served by bringing down barriers. That enabled Europe to act as one unit in trade and become a more powerful, as yet imperfect, force for trade liberalisation under internationally agreed common rules. Again, that's an issue we could be talking to the business sector about, to talking exporters about, if we had the government actually having the courage. And it makes me wonder why they don't. Have they got something to be worried about a proper consultation? Madam Deputy Speaker, consultation under these amendments would also give us the opportunity to remind everybody, particularly as the older generation will remind many younger members, citizens voting in this referendum if it happens, that Europe's success in reconciling once bitter foes established and consolidated peace and democracy and rights right across the European Union. It's really important that there is proper consultation, that there is an assessment of it, that Parliament has a chance to reflect upon it. For example, European Union enlargement, first to Greece, Spain and Portugal, countries which were relatively recently fascist dictatorships, and now to the former communist states, also under a form of dictatorship of Central and Eastern Europe, has amply shown how the zone of stability and democracy and prosperity can be extended right across the continent, where more wars have been fought over the centuries than in any other part of the world. And similarly, going forward, Madam Deputy Speaker, if there was proper consultation, we suggest a minimum in my amendment of 28 weeks, but I think that is a minimum. We'd have an opportunity to assess the impact of being part of association agreements with Ukraine, Georgia and Moldova, and also to make an assessment of the continuing accession negotiations which the EU is conducting with Turkey, which I believe is absolutely essential that it succeeds, because Turkey is a vital bridge between Europe and Asia, between West and East, between Christianity and Islam. And that again, if we just go into a referendum campaign in the heat and the din of a 3-week squabble over in or out, none of these issues will be revealed, and that's why consultation is absolutely essential. Well, I will do, but...
I thank my right honourable friend Goodway, and does he agree that consultation would also allow light to be shined upon the work of the Centre for European Reform, who only this month produced 35 recommendations, very much in line with what he was saying, and by the way, none of which, they argued, actually needed exit from the EU to deal with?
Indeed, I think the Centre for European Reform does some very, very good work, which again, I hope that they, under new Schedule 2, subsection J, will be offered an opportunity by government to be properly consulted. They're serious analysts. Yes. And by the way, Eurosceptic organisations should be consulted as well under that subsection. And a series of other organisations, some of which are specified in the new schedule, including the Trades Union Congress, should be consulted so that people understand that the European Union has brought with it policies to extend social, environmental and consumer rights. Without those, and despite the faults of the European Union, we would not have as fair a society as we do today. The Citizens Advice Bureau, the National Council for Voluntary Organisations, all specified under new Schedule 2, would have the opportunity to have their say as well. Madam Deputy Speaker, there's another opportunity a consultation would be provided for consultation to take place. And that is that to recognise, yes, that Europe has its faults, but the remedy is to get in there and argue for a stronger, reformed Europe, not for Britain to turn its back and to walk away. Absolutely. Although it's become fashionable to criticise Euroland, I think a consultation would reveal that its productivity per hour worked is far higher than Britain's. The workforce is sadly more highly skilled, and public services like health and transport are superior. Again, under new Schedule 2, whether it's under subsection G or whether it's under other subsections, organisations like the National Council for Voluntary Voluntary Organisations would actually be able to express their point of view and see whether they agree with that assessment or not. Another opportunity that the consultation would afford is that the Continentals probably have something to learn from our better record on employability and our more flexible labour market. But equally, it would reveal, I think, that we need to acknowledge that our employees are far less protected and subject to much greater job insecurity than those are on the continent. And I think consultation with the Trades Union Congress, consultation with other organisations, including the Citizens Advice Bureau, would reveal the high social costs of the inferior rights and job security that we sadly enjoy in Britain.
I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend. Of course, if there was to be a referendum on the basis that the government are, or at least the Conservative Party are proposing, it would be on worse terms in terms of the rights of trade unionists, of women, people on maternity leave. So it wouldn't be a question of the status quo or leaving. It would be a worse position or leaving, as put forward by the Fresh Start group and other Conservative backbenchers.
I have to agree completely with my honourable friend. That all of that social protection would simply be dispensed with under the Conservative nirvana. Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to come to consultation provided for under new Schedule 2 and Amendment 68 over the Common Agricultural Policy, and this matter has briefly been raised before. I would like to see the National Farmers Union, not only the National Farmers Union, consulted under subsection B of new Schedule 2, but also under J, subsection J, Farmers Union of Wales and NFU Cymru, because the CAP is wasteful and works against the interests of the world's poor. But a Britain on the margins of Europe would not be in a strong position to reform the CAP, and I'm sure that would be revealed by a consultation, nor would it be able to create more sustainable agriculture and rural communities. Without a full commitment to the European Union, we'll have less influence too on determining European negotiating positions in the World Trade Organization negotiations. I'm sure that the farmers' unions and organisations would endorse that position that I've just advanced in a consultation. I will in a minute. There'd also be less influence if we exited from the European Union in reforming the CAP. And the fact that we're on the border of the rest of the European Union means we're affected by the CAP, whether we like it or not. We're just disadvantaging our own farmers by not having the ability to influence what is going on in Brussels and the policies that flow from that as well. And I think a consultation would reveal that, and I think the overwhelmingly the farmers' unions and organisations would actually favour remaining within the European Union, and that would reveal the arguments in detail and test them one way or the other in a way that simply won't be possible in a short referendum campaign.
Entirely about what he says about the way in which our influence over many of these issues would be reduced if we left the European Union. But if I can draw him back to the actual content of his amendment, isn't there a problem with a prescriptive list of organisations like this? If the National Farmers Union, then why not the Soil Association or the CLA? If Universities UK, why not the Russell Group, or why not the Gazelle Group of FE colleges? If ACPO, why not GCHQ? That would be topical. I think there's a real problem with having such a prescriptive list.
I'm at a loss to understand, Madam Deputy Speaker, what exactly the Lib Dem role is in all of this. Because actually, if he looks down at new Schedule 2, he'll see that subsection J provides for other organisations. And that includes all of the organisations that he mentioned and many more that I'm about to mention. Coming to the question then of the consultation on the environment, without a proper, concerted approach to the environment from the whole of the European Union, which I think a consultation with Friends of the Earth, mentioned in subsection H, the Local Government Association, mentioned in subsection I, Greenpeace, the RSPB, the Worldwide Fund, the Wildlife Fund, all of those organisations would be able to confirm, I believe, in a consultation, that Britain on its own will be unable to guarantee a sustainable future for our citizens, because we're so close to the continent of Europe. Clear skies, pure water, clean beaches and a healthy environment can only be delivered by cooperation at a European level. And that is another reason that I think a consultation on the environment would reveal the case for staying in the European Union and why this bill is so irrelevant to that purpose. Madam Deputy Speaker, then on consultation on other issues. In the last 25 years, the greatest promoters of workers' rights, of women's rights, of rights for all against discrimination on grounds of race, sex, sexual orientation, age and disability have been European directives and decisions of the European Court of Justice, often forced on reluctant British. A consultation with the Trade Union Congress, a consultation with Age UK, a consultation with the TUC under subsection C, a consultation with the National Council of Voluntary Organisations under subsection G, and under subsection J, Age UK, Disability Rights UK, the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, Stonewall, and a number of other organisations, which I'm sure would be queuing up to be consulted to reinforce the point that membership of the European Union is actually very valuable for their members and also valuable for British citizens as a whole. Madam Deputy Speaker, also I would like to see proper consultation with the people of Wales prior to a referendum being called, and I suspect that the Welsh Government would happily organise that consultation on behalf of the UK Government if this amendment was accepted by the mover and supporter of the bill. Again, the Welsh Government, I suppose, could qualify under subsection J as one of the other organisations, but frankly I think it deserves rather more respect than that, and I'd like to see that consultation provide for that as well. Why, Madam Deputy Speaker? Because I think it would reveal the opportunity for that, provided by that consultation, would reveal that Wales benefits hugely from British membership of the European Union. Without the 1.9 billion of European Union funds, Wales would be missing 3.7 billion of investment since 2007. But for those that need further convincing, the top line figure breaks down into 6,000 new enterprises and 20,000 jobs. It is this support from Europe's funds that made it possible for the highly successful Jobs Growth Wales programme that saw over 8,000 jobs created for young people using European Union funding. Again, a consultation that the Welsh Government was able to organise on behalf of the UK Government would allow that proposition to be assessed. And for opponents of remaining within the European Union, they'd be able to assess it as well if a proper report were presented to Parliament and a debate took place, Madam Deputy Speaker. Of course, yeah.
Full to my honourable friend. He's making a balanced speech, but can he explain to the House why putting £2 in to the European Union for every pound that comes back is a sensible use of taxpayers' money?
To Wales, which I was discussing, Madam Deputy Speaker, there's a £40 per person surplus of the money contributed by Welsh citizens compared with the money that we receive back from the European Union. And you know, I'm not going to go much further into answering this question because that would take me beyond the terms of this debate and within the framework of the amendments. But I think, Madam Deputy Speaker, that a Welsh Government organised consultation with the people of Wales would overwhelmingly endorse a continued membership of the European Union, but more important, put objective facts before Parliament for us to be able to assess as is provided by these amendments, and particularly Amendment 68 moved by my honourable friend. Madam Deputy Speaker, could I also submit that a full consultation would reveal that the values of the British people have long backed are fundamentally also European values: community, solidarity, social justice and cohesion, a fair chance in life for all. These British values are also European values and are best realised by cooperation with our European colleagues. And I think if you consulted under subsection J of new clause of new Schedule 2, if you consulted, for example, the Royal United Services Institute, I think they would say that the idea that Britain can pull up the drawbridge and declare ourselves alone is nonsense. Anti-Europeanism has got no answers to the increasing interdependence of our globe. I'm sure that RUSI would endorse that position, but at any rate, I don't speak for them. They would have the opportunity through a consultation to express their point of view and for all of us to make an assessment of it. So it seems to me, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we need to really emphasise the importance to the mover of this bill. Why he won't accept these amendments, I have no idea. Why the government won't support these amendments, or why the minister won't support these amendments, unless he's going to surprise me. I hope he does. He's not looking he's going to surprise me in the way that he's smiling enigmatically at me, but I think that it would actually enhance the strength of this bill and the case for this bill. Madam Deputy Speaker, I think another opportunity revealed for the consultation would be to actually lay out the facts about the consequences of those who are the consequences for Britain of those who argue that European withdrawal would be replaced by joining the North Atlantic Free Trade Area. I'm sure if we consulted the CBI, or for that matter the Institute of Directors, or for that matter an independent group like the Institute for Fiscal Studies, the National Institute for Social and Economic Research, I'm sure they'd reveal that British trade with the EU trade is 3 times that of North America. We'd over twice the trade with Holland than with the major southeastern economies. The rest of the European Union buys 3 times as many UK exports by value as the UK's next most important export partner, the US, equivalent to 15% of UK GDP. Again, these facts would be able to be assessed. UKIP and others would no doubt be able to make their arguments. But without a proper assessment, without a proper consultation for which we're asking, none of these arguments are going to really have a chance to be assessed in the run-up to the short, concentrated, volatile and highly charged referendum campaign. Yeah, of course, yeah.
My right honourable friend, I do apologise. He's making a strong case for why all these issues have to be examined in great depth, and I think if he reflects on the referendum that's currently happening in Scotland, the debate has not risen to those levels because we've not had that in-depth analysis of all the issues around the Scottish referendum, and the debate has therefore left so many unanswered questions that the people of Scotland are demanding more information.
I take his evidence with some credibility, Madam Deputy Speaker, as a Scottish MP of high repute in this House. It looks, if you look at the Scottish referendum process, it's exactly that reinforces the case for these amendments and the case that we're putting. And then I want to go on to the other argument that those who are withdrawing suggest that we can have our cake and eat it by staying within the European single market to retain the great bulk of our trade, which is with EU countries. This again could be assessed on the basis of the proper consultation specified in Amendment 68 and New Schedule 2. They argue that you first of all avoid the costs of membership they denounce as too high, and second that EU regulations which they insist make our economy uncompetitive, and third the loss of sovereignty they allege comes with European political union. You'd be able to assess actually what those arguments, what they count for and how serious they are. Because I think an opportunity to consult properly with all the different groups involved and all the different sources of expertise would reveal that the facts are rather different. First, the price of Britain's EU membership is rather more modest than the anti-Europeans would have us believe. The government contributed £7 billion to the European Union in 2012, around 1%.
On a point of order, Mr. Edward Lee.
Is this a debate about the merits or not of remaining part of the European Union?
I've already said this morning, I'm listening very carefully to all members in the chamber to ensure that they adhere strictly to the terms of the amendments that they are proposing, and the honourable member is in order in the remarks that he's making. Thank you. Mr. Peter Haig.
A consultation would also reveal, I believe, and I'm sure the CBI would want something to say about this because its reports seem to indicate this as well, that the government contributed £7 billion to the EU in 2012, around 1% of total public expenditure, and equivalent to 0.4% of GDP. But although leaving the EU and rejoining the single market would cost Britain less, it would cost Britain a bit less, it would not be much less. We'd have to negotiate the kind of relationship enjoyed by Norway, the largest of the nations in the European Economic Area, that we would presumably join. And again, I think I'm actually going to make a bit more progress so that others can get a chance to speak. And again, a consultation, for example, with the Institute of Directors, a consultation with the CBI, a consultation with the independent economic think tanks, would also endorse that joining the EEA would cost Britain around £6 billion. Now, yes, that is around £1 billion or 17% less than for our membership of the European Union, but it's still very high by comparison, and it assumes that EU partners sought our departure would be in an open frame of mind to accept us back into some kind of trading relationship. But secondly, and again, I'm sure the CBI and all the different business organisations, including the British Chambers of Commerce, would be wanting to have their say about this. Secondly, we would still be bound by the very same regulations in being members of the European Economic Area that the anti-EU camp actually denounce. In return for access to the single market, Norway and all countries like Switzerland and Iceland must adopt nearly all European Union legislation relevant to the free movement of goods, services and capital and people, together with laws in areas such as employment, consumer protection, environmental policy and competition. Again, there'll be a chance to properly assess this, a report placed before Parliament, days hopefully on the floor of the House debating whether we accept that report or not, whether we accept that assessment or not. And also, we'd be able to assess a point made by the CBI, and it did have a chance to have its say, rather than in the compressed period of a short referendum campaign, that, as it's pointed out, it would also be, I will in a moment, be bound by future European Union law in these areas, even though we were outside the European Union, of course.
Address the question which the member for Windsor has put forward with regard to the date of the 23rd of October 2014, which hasn't yet been debated. Does he agree that that would get totally entangled with the Scottish referendum, which is only a month before? That furthermore, it also is very dangerous to choose a specific date, as was the case in 2007 when we had to delay the local elections because of the foot and mouth outbreak, and that there are a whole stack of reasons for not having a specific date on which to hold a referendum in the way it's been proposed.
Say, Madam Deputy Speaker, that as in 1992-93, when we were on the same side of the argument on the Maastricht Treaty, I completely agree with him. His logic on this point is absolutely faultless, even if on many other European matters it often isn't. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, again, if consulted, I believe that all the business organisations, but maybe I'm right or wrong, maybe I'm wrong, would actually take the view that the CBI report does in dismissing a customs union, the Turkey option, as an alternative to European Union membership, as the very worst of all the halfway alternatives, leaving the UK with very limited EU market access and zero influence over trade deals. Of course.
He's very gracious in giving way when we're so pressed for time. I would just like to invite him to go back to the point raised by my honourable friend for Stone, and can he explain then, if the setting of an earlier date is such a problem, why Amendment 22 by his own colleague suggests the date of 2014. Although I was listening fairly carefully to his own colleague's scintillating contribution, I'm not sure that I heard him address that point specifically, and I would be very interested to know if the opposition will be voting for that amendment.
I think I'll invite him, Madam Deputy Speaker, to much respect though I have for him, to wait and see. It may not even be today, for all I know. That's not in my hands. But if my honourable friend has the chance to catch Madam Deputy Speaker's eye, no doubt his question will be answered. So I was making the point that consultation under new Schedule 2 would also reveal that retaining membership only of a customs union would be an inappropriate economic stance for the UK in the modern global economy, because the CBI report suggests that with non-tariff barriers often replacing tariffs as the major obstacle to trade, a customs union would not be sufficient to support Britain's trading ambitions in the modern global economy with its complex supply chains, and it could limit UK access to EU markets in areas such as services, which our economy is so based upon. Madam Deputy Speaker, then we come to the question of trade and direct trade, because, again, I think consultation with the CBI, with the Institute of Directors, with the British Chambers of Commerce under new Schedule 2 and Amendment 68 would reveal that Britain's trade with countries outside the EU is all conducted under the auspices of trading agreements negotiated centrally by Brussels, because the EU has exclusive competence to negotiate trade agreements with other countries. No EU member state can have its own separate bilateral trade agreements. And if we left the European Union, its trading arrangements, both with other European EU countries and outside the EU, our trading arrangements would likely be determined by individual bilateral negotiation. And the terms on which we did so would be, by default, be governed by the terms of WTO agreements. As a member of the WTO in our own right, there's no legal impediment on us negotiating those agreements, but we'd be in a much weaker position, and I think a consultation would reveal that as well. Madam Deputy Speaker, as the CBI, I think, would argue, given that its report makes much the same point, that if it were consulted, if it had a proper chance to consult all its members, which it couldn't possibly do in the course of a 3-week or so referendum campaign, nor would Parliament be able to assess the outcome of that, I think it would reveal that that the UK would become eligible for tariffs outside the European Union that the EU imposes on goods entering from outside the Union as well. It may also face higher tariffs levied by other countries with which the EU has preferential trade agreements. The point I think that a consultation would also reveal is, as the CBI has argued in its report, going it alone through the WTO would reduce market access through increased tariffs on the UK goods and services, refraining from entering into any formal relationship with the EU, and simply relying on the World Trade Organization rules is not a model that would assist Britain in achieving the global trading role to which we aspire and which we've historically enjoyed. Of course.
I have great respect for the honourable member, but can I suggest he doesn't keep referring to the CBI, because after all, this was the organisation that suggested there would be dire consequences if we did not join the euro. With regard to his wider point about trade, much smaller countries such as Switzerland, at the heart of Europe, can not just survive but thrive outside the EU on the basis of trade. Can I suggest he reflects on that, because he's talking down our ability to negotiate trade agreements with the wider world, which really doesn't justify the evidence or the facts.
Yeah. I disagree with the honourable member. He won't be surprised to hear. But, you know, Norway and Switzerland, especially Switzerland, these are very small countries. Britain is a big country with a global role, and an historic global role as well, both in trade terms and in diplomatic and foreign policy and defence terms. And the idea that we're going to be a kind of Norway with nukes seems to me to be no kind of prescription for Britain's future holding its head high in the world at all. Yes, of course.
Thank the right member for giving way. If you're not just going to listen to the CBI, perhaps we should listen to Nissan as well in our region, who have come out today to say that it would be a real mistake to come out of Europe and exit that door, when you consider that they employ 6,500 people in the northeast and they have 40,000 people in the supply chain. Aren't they the kind of people we should be listening to as well?
Indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. I think a consultation should be held. One of the first organisations that should be consulted under subsection J of new Schedule 2 is Nissan, with its 6,500 workers in Sunderland, a major European car manufacturer. And what did its chief executive say today? He said, Carlos Ghosn, he said, if anything has to change, we'd need to reconsider our strategy and our investments for the future. That's to say, if Britain were to leave the European Union. Because the point I was about to make, I think I will make a bit of progress. I have let the honourable member in a number of times. The point I was about to make under this point about consultation is that inward investors, particularly Japanese companies like Nissan, come into the European Union, bringing with them tens of thousands of jobs, direct jobs and indirect jobs as well, and a lot of wealth. They come here because they're part of the single market of the European Union. And again, we'd be able to consult them about it. and we'd be able to consult Ford, who have a plant at Bridgend and elsewhere in the United Kingdom, and they're in the United Kingdom rather than elsewhere in the European Union because we are members of the EU, part of the single market. We'd want to consult them. We'd want to consult Sony. We'd want to consult Toyota. We'd want to consult Airbus. My honourable friend, the member for Ogmore, reminds me. That's a really important company right on the Welsh-English border in the northeast of Wales. It would need to be consulted as well. I think I need...
Before the honourable gentleman attempts to make further progress, I should perhaps suggest to him that he is in danger, although he has been perfectly in order in speaking about consultation, he is in danger of being a little repetitive on... And it might be as well for him to consider drawing his remarks to a conclusion in the near future.
I was planning to do precisely that, Madam Deputy Speaker, and indeed I regret taking so many interventions because otherwise I'd have done it already. But whether it's on this argument about sovereignty, I think if we consulted under subsection J of New Schedule 2 organisations such as the Royal United Services Institute in respect of our membership of NATO. We've given up sovereignty to be members of NATO, but we've gained extra power and influence. We've given up sovereignty, yes, of course we have, to be members of the European Union, but we've gained extra economic, political, diplomatic influence. And if we consulted Friends of the Earth and Greenpeace over the environmental benefits that we've had by having a say in the policies of the countries right on our border on the continent of Europe, we have a say over those. We are a key force in determining all of these decisions, and the consultation would be part of that as well. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think all of this points to the fact that consultation, systematic consultation, with all the different parts of our society, all the different groups in our society specified in New Schedule 2 would give us a great opportunity to go into this debate and to decide if we're going to have a referendum at all, when it should be. That would be the great advantage which this bill is currently unamended, denying us the opportunity of doing. And more important, it's denying an obligation placed upon government to consult. And for government, having consulted over a lengthy period of time, then to come back to Parliament, and for Parliament to have a considered debate about this, rather than to be stampeded into a referendum, either next year, for all the reasons the honourable member for Stone said, and others have said, no doubt will say, would be the wrong choice in my view, or indeed setting an arbitrary date sometime in 2017, conceivably, without my amendment being accepted, conceivably, actually in the middle of the United Kingdom presidency. Can you imagine the nonsense of doing that and leaving us in an entirely invidious position and indeed a laughing stock of a referendum happening in that 6 months? So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I believe that accepting these amendments, and I do hope that the mover of the bill will reconsider, and I hope that the Europe Minister, when he contributes to the debate, will back these amendments, because if he doesn't, if either of them don't do those, then I have to ask, what are they frightened of? Are they frightened of actually the facts being revealed, the arguments being revealed, and the British people deciding actually either they don't want a referendum on these timetables at all, or that if they do want a referendum at some stage in the future, they believe staying within the European Union is the right thing to do?